Envy is a venomous snake that bites its owner, and artists are no stranger to its many forms. How easy it is to look at the great works of another, and instead of admiring such things, we turn to jealously desiring them for ourselves. And it's hard to blame ourselves for this. The art world is vast. The skills of some titans loom over us normal folk like kings and queens in feudal lands. So what can we do about it? Greetings, my name is Zach, and welcome to the podcast. On this channel, we talk about artistic and creative struggles, where they come from, and how we might combat them. If that sounds like your cup of tea, please consider subscribing. Well, what is artistic envy? Let's define it as this for the duration of the podcast. Artistic envy is the feeling of discomfort or jealousy that artists may feel when comparing their own artistic creations to those of another. This other is usually perceived as being a better artist, possessing a higher level of skill, or producing better products. The envy itself refers to a desire or longing for the talent, skill, recognition, opportunities, or other perceived beneficial qualities the target of the envy possesses. In addition, this emotional response is often accompanied by a lack of motivation, a feeling of hopelessness, and/or a sense of dread when approaching the art-making process. With definition in hand, let's take a look at where does this come from. The first thing I'd like to explore is a comparison culture and social media. Yes, we talk about this so frequently in our world. We just see too much. Likes and views are easy to see, and we mistake them for an actual metric of skill or quality. At least in the United States, we have a tendency to compare everything to something else, usually to a thing we perceive as having a higher value. I know this is not limited to my home country. In fact, this is one of the most human things a person can do. We have such a tendency to compare one thing to another, it's just how we look at the world. The problem is, when you do this with art, you are inevitably comparing two things you understand very little about, or at least one of those things, the other person's work, you don't know all the pieces to. There are so many variables, simple things like time and experience, and even more complicated ones like social opportunities and subject matter. It's just too difficult to get an accurate comparison much of the time. However, it's simply a part of who we are. We are born into a culture, born into humanity, which compares one thing to another and registers one of those things as being better than the other. Sometimes this comes from seeking external validation. If you seek or need validation for the creative work you pursue, it's easy to become envious when you see others receiving what you desire. And unfortunately, we can see so much art now, and our feeds are all carefully curated to show us the best in the field, that we seem pale in comparison to whoever it is that we admire. This is one of the downsides of social media, though there's nothing innately wrong with social media. Maybe there is. That might be its own podcast at some point. But the fact that we can see all of these pieces, we can see all of the curated pieces that are the highest quality in whatever field we tend to gravitate towards, it gives us mixed signals. We see people getting thousands of likes or views on their artwork, and we see ours getting a dozen or fewer. And that makes it hard to not desire what those other people have, the validation, the recognition that they are receiving. And if you are the kind of person, a people pleaser, or some other kind of trait in your character that leads you to need that or desire that, it can be so difficult not to be envious when you see others receiving that validation that you so desperately desire. Sometimes it can be as practical as you have limited personal opportunities. The world is not fair. Some people are born into wealth or into social structures that simply make art easier. Some people have parents or mentors in their life that are incredibly supportive, and some people get mocked at every social gathering because they put time into something as useless as art. The world is simply not fair. We do not all have the same opportunities, and this discrepancy can make it easy to fall into envy, particularly with something as complicated as the artistic journey. I have been quite fortunate in my life. My parents were fairly encouraging in my artistic pursuits. My father even serving as part of the inspiration for me to pursue art in the first place. I have people in my life that have had it much better, people born into an art business, a home that makes most of its income in that community, born with innumerable connections already made. And I know other people who have fought tooth and nail for every step of their artistic journey, fighting their parents, their family, their teachers, and the universe as a whole. Reality can be cruel, but it can also be beautiful. You have to make sure that if your envy is coming from your particular situation that you were born into, that you understand that is where it's coming from. And the fact that, unfortunately, life is not always fair. Sometimes envy comes from insecurity. Artists have a well-earned reputation for thinking less of their own artwork than everyone else around them. Insecurity about the quality of your own pieces can easily lead to overblowing the quality of another artist's work. The big thing here is trust other people's opinions about your artwork more than you do, especially if their reflections are positive. This could be detrimental if the community around you is pretty negative about your artwork, but in general, in my experience, especially working with middle and high school students and in college, most artists are really hard on themselves. The artistic communities that they belong to are really encouraging, their parents are really encouraging, and they just choose not to believe it because they don't see it themselves. So if you are in a similar situation where people online in your Discord community, on Instagram, in school, whatever it might be, are encouraging concerning your artwork, choose to trust their aggregate opinions about the quality of your work more than just your own artistic sensibilities, or at least give them a little bit more value than you are currently. Most of the students I taught over the years would hold on to a piece of negative feedback like a golden nugget, but they would toss out nearly every positive piece they received like it was a scrap of cardboard. Insecurity is natural, but it serves little purpose, and it can easily lead to envy. A fear of failure is perhaps one of the most common causes of artistic envy. Now, this might seem a little bit bizarre, but we as artists often will conjure additional emotions and feelings because it's easier to deal with something as uncomfortable as envy rather than focus on our own failures or the risk of failing. We often dodge engaging in our own artwork to focus on other things. And sometimes we can choose to focus on the skills we don't have, the talent we don't have, the opportunities we don't have, all these things that cause this venomous envy to build up inside of us instead of just diving into our own work. It becomes a distraction. It becomes something that we focus on instead of working on our own artwork. And often if we sift through all of those pieces, we will get down to we're afraid of failing. We're afraid of engaging in the thing and knowing for certain that we can't do it because we don't trust ourselves. We don't have the confidence to move forward in that. And sometimes that alone keeps us in this terrible space of being jealous and envious of other artists rather than just putting time into developing our own skills and getting closer to our own goals and ambitions. Which actually leads us directly into the next cause for artistic envy: unfulfilled ambitions and dreams. The things you are envious of are often the things you wish you could achieve. Here's the thing: time spent being envious is not going to get you there. Analyzing how they did, that might help. Choosing to turn that into a different thing, a different trigger for yourself. The shift from envy to admiration is not a huge one. In fact, they have simultaneous stimuli, right? When you encounter something that is tremendous, something that is awesome in the true sense of the word, it inspires you with awe. You can either look at that thing and admire the fact that it exists. You can take joy in the fact that this thing exists on the same plane that you do. Or you can choose to be jealous and envious of it, looking to find the negativity and pull apart the fact that I didn't get to do this. It's not fair that they got to do this. It's a choice. In a lot of cases, we have the ability to choose between admiration and envy of the thing that is so tremendous. Impatience is an extremely common reason that artists end up struggling with envy. Not able to hold back our own impatience, we feel like we should be growing faster, or worse, like growth is owed to us. Sometimes this comes from the misunderstanding that art is a puzzle, and that if we simply find or arrange all of the pieces correctly, our greatness is assured. Art, in truth, is far more complicated. It's more like cooking is to baking. It's less precise and scientific, and many approach the same thing quite differently. Patience is a struggle for all craftspeople. Creatives seem to struggle with it more than others. Perhaps this is because as artists, our eyes develop faster than our ability to create. I can see what's wrong, so why can't I fix it? I struggle with impatience, which is ironic because in most of my life, I don't. I have no problem holding off on opening presents or looking forward to things that are really far down the line, like vacations. I can plan a vacation a year in advance now because I'm old. But when it comes to artistic growth, I'm extremely impatient, to the point where I have spent large portions of my artistic career tracking every single minute that I put into my artwork. I want to know how long it's taking me to get from point A to point B to point C to point D, all the way down the line. I want to know. I've spent a lot of time researching how long does it actually take to do this thing, and the reality is it's not calculable. It's not something that I can find somebody else's data and then know for certain this is how long it's going to take me to do this. But all that time that I put into that impatience, giving into that, is time I wasn't spending on my artwork. It was time I was spending being impatient, being envious of other people's growth, and looking into trying to find some secret reason for how they got there. And the reality is, there isn't a secret. Art requires an excruciating level of patience, and it's really easy for a lack of patience to lead into artistic envy. Stagnation is another cause. When everyone around you looks like they are growing at an exceptional rate, and yet you haven't improved in months. It can be easy to dip into the well of envy if this is where you are. Your stagnation is likely not as true as you think it is, but it can make you feel hopeless. It can make you feel like your time invested is not being valuable. It can make it look like you are in the shadow of all these other people, and that's where you are going to remain forever. Now, this is tied in really closely with impatience, because your impatience is probably coming from feeling like you haven't moved, like you have stagnated. And so these two are really, really similar, but for different people, the triggers are going to come in differently. So if you feel like you are stagnant and that leads you to envy others, that is a really easy potential cause to have there. The last one that I want to touch on here in causes, before I spend too much time on the negative aspects, which I always feel like I do, but I also think it's important. It's important to understand what the triggers are as human beings that put us in these situations. This last one I think is a little bit different though, and it's kind of intriguing. It can come from a failure to think about the target of our envy as a human being. When we look to skilled artists, we can sometimes forget that they are just like us. They likely had the same feelings we have, or perhaps they still do. Many artists that we follow, that we adore, if you really listen to an interview with them, they still feel like they're not good enough. They still feel like everyone else around them is so much better. Many of them have suffered, practiced, experienced trauma and disappointment in their own artistic journeys. Many have simply put in 10 times the amount of time that we have. Whatever the truth may be, they are human, just like us. We should not be so hasty as to distill their essence down into a singular thing. They are more than just an artist. They're a person. Their artistic abilities are a culmination of their humanity, as our skills are the culmination of our life and experiences. It can be more difficult to envy another if you remember that they likely stood in your shoes not too long ago. So what can we do about it? So much of dealing with envy comes down to the mental space that it inhabits. Envy itself is a feeling, an emotion, a desire to have what another possesses to the point where it negatively impacts the feeler of said emotions. Because of this, many of the methods to fight it are going to be mental in nature. So much of envy is caught up in our heads that we have to restructure how we think, reformat how we approach a thing. That being said, I will go over some practical advice first as well, before diving into the mental exercises one might undertake in order to stave off the evil that is artistic envy. Try limiting your social media time. I know this comes up frequently. I've probably talked about it a dozen times or more on this channel, but limiting your social media time if you find that you are succumbing to envy of artistic types is going to benefit you dramatically. When you are exposed to so many different kinds of art, so many different pieces of art, and when an algorithm is specifically kicking art to you that is getting the most likes and the most views, it makes it really hard if you're already struggling with something like envy. So staving off some of that is just going to be as easy as refraining from engaging in that media. For some people, you can do this by restructuring how you're doing it, giving yourself a 5, 10, 15-minute time limit on your lunch break or whatever it might be, and just only allow yourself that small amount of time on social media. For some of you, it might mean just ditching it all for quite a while. I still don't have a Facebook account. I deleted mine, I think 12 or 13 years ago, and I haven't looked back. Now, of course, as I'm starting to move forward in an art business sense, I'm realizing I'm probably going to need to get one again, and I'm not exactly excited about it. I spend time on YouTube and Instagram, but I do try to time how much I'm spending on those formats. I usually only watch videos when I'm working out, when I'm driving. I don't actually watch them, I just listen to them. Don't worry about me, I'm safe. Or when I'm doing things like the dishes or putting away laundry. Those are the times generally that I watch or listen to YouTube videos. Instagram, most of my time is finding things that I think are cool, artistic strategies that I want to adopt, or sending funny things to my wife. So I try to limit that time as well. Here's another thing you can do. Contact your peers and friends. Connect with them. If you are struggling with envy, like so many emotions that negatively affect us, if you share it with people that are important to you, it gets some of that weight off of your chest immediately. It won't dissipate all of it, and it won't always be a good solution for the entirety of the problem, but presenting it to your friends, to people in your community, will often allow you to start alleviating some of those symptoms. And also, your friends probably struggle with similar things. If you have a whole bunch of friends in your life who are drawers and painters, and you tell them, I look at Loish's work and I feel like such a terrible artist. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. They're probably gonna go, yeah, I know, right? And then you guys can rant about it for a couple minutes. You'll find some solace in that. Some of the emotion will be alleviated and you can move forward. Also, though, you'll probably get some good input from those friends. They might be able to tell you what things to focus on so that you can work toward the goals that you have. They also might give you some encouraging feedback on the qualities that your art does have that are good and maybe even better than the artist that you're looking forward or you're looking to. Words, strange words. Here's another thing you can do. You can document your progress. This is something that I do a lot because of the way that my brain works. I tend to document everything. This is actually part of the reason that I use Instagram the way that I do. I try to load things up fairly frequently because it allows me to look back on where my paintings were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's why I keep sketchbooks. I can go back and I can look at the fact that my art is improving. Because I have days where I feel like a failure as an artist, where I feel like I'm not progressing, I'm not growing, or I'm not growing fast enough. So being able to look back at things that I've done in the past makes that feeling dissipate. It doesn't dissolve it entirely, but it gives me a little bit of hope. Like, oh, I am getting better. Even if it feels like I'm trying to climb up a set of stairs that each stair is the same height as me and all my fingers are broken and my legs don't work and they're tied to giant lead weights, which is sometimes how it feels. But documenting your progress can at least show you that even if that is the staircase you're climbing, that you've already climbed 100 steps. Look into the process of the artists you envy. This is kind of a strange one, but take a look at how they work. And if you cannot find any evidence of how they put their artwork together, run away. This sounds silly, but I think it's probably helpful for you if you experience envy. If you look at an artist on Instagram and you only ever see finished products, nothing in process, no sketches, no reels that are showing you how they got to that point, just disengage from it. This is only if it's causing you negativity, right? Not just in every scenario. Like, don't do this in every scenario. It's not going to benefit you. But if you are struggling with envy, find artists whose work is unpackable. You can see how they got there. You can maybe see their reference sheets, their sketches. I love Loish for this reason because you can go and look at her sketches and you can see how she gets to that point. She records videos of how she draws and paints the things that she does. Even for people who are, just beginning their artistic journey, being able to see how another artist works is a powerful, powerful tool. So try to look into how the artists that you wish you were more like, how they work, how they go about their processes. It just starts to demystify some of their work. It makes it a little bit easier to understand them as a human being and how they're going about things. Maybe try to find artists that are more akin to your skill level. It is too difficult to look at a master as an amateur and understand what they are doing. If you find artists that are only 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, then you have a better chance of finding your path to the plateau that they inhabit. I know this sounds a little bit strange, but if you find artists that are more akin to where you are right now, there's more of a chance that you're really going to get some beneficial stuff from them. If you're just starting an instrument and you're listening to the best person in the world at that instrument, you are not going to glean much except for what is possible. But if you are part of a band at your local school, or let's say you're starting trumpet and you've got 6 or 7 other trumpet players, all of them have had more time in it than you, you're going to massively benefit from the guy who is just 6 months ahead of you. So try to find people on Instagram or on YouTube that are pretty similar to your skill level. I think this is a good idea in any creative pursuit, by the way. If you're writing, it's good to read the masters, but it's also good to read what amateur writers are putting together, to have friends that are writing and see what they're doing, to be able to analyze each other's work, to be able to look at the sculptures your friend is producing. Any creative endeavor, it seems to be beneficial to have people in your life, or at least an awareness of people that are only a couple skill levels higher than you are. Consider taking on a challenge, personal or otherwise. Things like draw a box, Inktober, draw this in my style, or even just deciding that you want to draw 100 birds. Giving yourself something that is direct and prescriptive so that you can follow it can be very helpful. This is actually mostly a distraction from the envy. It's giving yourself something to focus on. I talked about earlier how envy can actually be something where we're just spinning our wheels and we're not actually making any progress on something. So if you can actually just take your energy and divert it to a different thing and do that thing, you've moved on. You've moved to a different place. Now the envy is probably going to come back like a tidal wave later, but that's something you can deal with then. There's always the chance that the tidal wave dissipates and that you've now focused your energies in a more constructive place. And the last one I want to talk about before moving into the mental shifts and the psychological ways that we can reformat how we look at artistic envy is play. Art is great for play. Make art for fun. If you have been over-dedicating your time to progress, to growth, to classes, to professionalism, those things are valuable. But art is also about joy. It's about fun. Most of us got into it because it was fun for us in our youth, or we're good at it. Find a way to play with your art, to go back into it and engage with it like a child. Find a way to give yourself some more joy when it comes to your art making. All right, let's talk about our brains and mindset shifts, how we can reformat and recontextualize how we're thinking about something like artistic envy. Acknowledge your feelings. Right off the bat, remember that feelings are an important part of being human. Burying them, devaluing them is not prudent, and you can lead to some destructive habits and run into some destructive results further down the road if this is what you do. Instead, hold on to those feelings in the palm of your hands, examine them, think about them, acknowledge them. What do they mean to you? What will you do with them? They are, after all, a part of you. Don't throw your feelings away. Your feelings are valid and they're valuable, and they're an important component of who you are as a person. Don't let them control you, but don't ignore them. Try to shift envy to admiration. They come from a similar place, like I mentioned earlier, and the acknowledgement of something great can lead you to either one of these emotions. Choosing to be envious hurts you. Choosing to admire lets you sit in awe and enjoy what another can do. This is difficult. Shifting your mindset is, but it's a lot of what we have to do if we want to move forward and have ourselves be in a more positive headspace when it comes to art making. Negativity is easy, and for many of us, especially as artists, that's what we naturally dip into. So you can choose to try to take those energies and move them in the opposite direction and choose admiration over envy. Try to recognize that envy does not benefit you. This is another one of those strategies that works well for my strange brain, but might not for everyone. I am able to look at this as being illogical and disengage my brain from it, most of the time. If you can do the same, wonderful. I highly recommend simply trying to wrap your head around these facts, though, regardless of how you are wired. That envy does not benefit you, and if you can start to force yourself away from the emotion, you will likely be in a better position. Think about what your envy teaches you. It shows you a direction you want to aim for and what you feel you are missing. This is a weird thing, but a lot of negative emotions like this can actually point you in a direction of what your natural desires and inclinations are. If you are really envious of a particular artist, think hard about what it is that they do that you envy, because it probably tells you exactly what you want to be able to do and you feel like you can't right now. If you can find a way to follow the direction it points you in, you may have an easier time working on those adjacent skills, leveling up your abilities and pulling yourself closer to your goal. I have found this with the artists that I gravitate towards nowadays. They often do something similar to what I do, only much better. I follow them, trying to look at what they do and figure out how they do it. How can I glean from them and improve myself? How can I find the shortcuts that they found through hard work and skip the hard work? Which only sometimes works, but when it does feel like magic. Giving in to envy would lead me to simply stare in awe. but following the arrow it spray paints on the ground tells me what to do next. Try focusing on growth. This is something that gets brought up a lot in the artistic community, and it is difficult. It is difficult to try to think about the fact that you're working towards a goal, you're working towards progress, you're working towards gaining better skills, and that process is long. It can detach you, though, if you really engage from it, or really engage with it. It can detach you from focusing on the product. And usually when we're envying something, we're not envying a process, we're envying a product. If you can detach yourself from only focusing on the finished thing and focusing on the journey, on the piece, on the progress, on the way that you're working through a thing, it's much harder to envy in that circumstance. We all should be focusing on growth, at least for a portion of our art making time anyway, because so many of us, I would really lean towards saying most of us desire to be better than we are. I don't know that I've run into maybe more than 2 artists in my entire life that are like, no, I'm good, I'm content with where I'm at. And if I did run into that, and I have run into people that are that way with other careers, it always seems so anathema to how I function that I feel like I'm one of the old map quests, like the old GPS systems. It's just sitting there staring into space going, recalculating. It's just such a foreign concept. Like I can't imagine getting to a point with any skill that I possess where I'm just like, yep, I'm good now. That's good enough. I have to work on being good with myself, good with my progress, good with the fact that I'm focusing on growth, because the position, the destination that I have obtained will likely never be good enough. Try focusing on successes without comparison. Your successes are not defined by someone else's position. They are defined by your goals, by your accomplishments, and by your progress. Your individual artistic goals are yours. They don't belong to anyone else. If someone else has achieved a goal that you set for yourself, it really doesn't mean anything. And it might not even be their goal. It might be a sub-goal on the way to their true goal. Your goals are yours, and so define your successes by how close you're getting to them and what you achieve, by your own accomplishments. This is really not terribly difficult if you're aware of it. It's hard when you're not aware of it, when you're just moving forward and you're moving forward towards some amorphous thing. But if you're aware of your goals, of what you want to do, if you understand your ambitions, then it's pretty easy to start judging yourself and your successes based on how close you've gotten to those things. The art journey is long, it's hard, and so if you can give yourself little benchmarks and you can focus on those and you can give yourself a pat on the back, or even tell the people around you, the people that love you, that you respect their opinions, tell them when you do something that you're happy with, when you feel like you've obtained an accomplishment of some kind. You've hit a goal, you've hit a landmark in your artistic journey. I struggle with this, and I feel like most artists do. I will often go to my wife or my best friend from growing up, and I will tell them almost sheepishly when I feel like I've hit a benchmark somewhere. And of course, they're always so excited, but we're sheepish this way. Like, we don't want to put time and energy into our own accomplishments. We often undervalue them, and it's just some weird thing that we do as artists. So try to take some pride in your accomplishments, share them with people around you, and find joy in those things. And understand that your success is not based on the comparison of another. It's not based on someone else's success. It's only based on you and yours. Try practicing gratitude. It may seem cliche, but it is wonderful for most aspects of life. Think about the fact that you get to make things. You have the desires, the abilities, and you get to bring things into existence. Be grateful for the beautiful things in your life, for your experiences, and for all of the everything. We are artists. We get to make things. We have this natural desire or compulsion, depending on which side of the fence you're on, to make things. And we make the things that make life worth living a lot of the time. Even if you are beginning or you feel like your art skills are really, really, really low, everyone's were at some point. That's fine. It might not be fine for you if you stay there forever, but you don't have to. The nice part about practicing, about moving forward with art, is that it's almost inevitable if you practice and if you work on things. Stagnation is often not actually stagnation, it just feels like it because we are so focused on where we are at that moment. It's why keeping sketchbooks, keeping records of your pieces is so good, because you can look back on where you've been and go, oh my goodness, I have improved. We have to focus on giving ourselves some grace, on being grateful for the beneficial and good things in our life, because they are many. And even if they aren't, even if the vast majority of the stuff in your life is negative, focusing on the positives will help your mood and will put you in a better place. Sorry, I just smacked my desk on accident as I'm like, my hands are wildly moving around as I talk. Sometimes you get the weird noises in the background as I'm doing things because I accidentally hit things, and because my hands are moving, and because my fingers and wrist pop, because snowboarding when you're young and don't know what you're doing and you crack your wrist and fingers because I pop them too much, don't I? I think we all do that too. The last thing here is cultivate self-compassion. I know this kind of ties into the gratitude, or at least my rambles associated with it. But be gracious with yourself, be kind with yourself. Envying often pits you against people who are just titans in whatever their realm is. And you're not thinking about the fact that you've been drawing for 5 years and they've been drawing for 27, and they do it professionally, and so they get to do it 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It's not fair to you. It's not really realistic to compare the 15 hours a week that you can manage to squeak in after school and work and taking care of a child or whatever your life is to somebody who does it all the time. Be kind to yourself. Be gracious with yourself. Envying is only going to make you feel worse about your work, about who you are as an artist, and it's going to make your life worse. So if you can find a way to disengage from it, to give yourself compassion, to give yourself grace, life will be better, and your art will be better as well. As always, thank you for listening. I appreciate every single one of you who comes by, who listens, who comments, who gives me feedback on these. It's a wonderful thing that we're starting to build this community to have these kinds of discussions and talk about these things. So I sincerely hope that there was some benefit to you in this podcast. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.